Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me, as always, on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys. This is the Air Raid Hour, presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And I'll tell you what, after the last Patriots game, I I reenacted the Stephon Diggs, the point. I said, you. Welcome into the Air Raid Hour. And I was sort of thinking about what I could have done to introduce this show. And the best I could come up with was I wholeheartedly considered starting the show shirtless in honor of Ryan Fitzpatrick. But as I was telling you before the show started, I'm in my brand new studio here, and I haven't had a chance to hang up a curtain up against the wall. So there is just a open window facing out the front of my house. I'm on the second level here above the garage, and literally anyone in my neighborhood can just look in right now and see, like, what is that dude doing? Why are there cameras? Why are there lights? Why is there a microphone? Like, what is this new neighbor doing right now? So the last thing I wanted was to do that shirtless and have them think I was some kind of cam model. So you just get the basic intro today, but there was anything basic about the Buffalo Bills curb stomping of the New England Patriots 47-17 on Saturday night. How great was your Sunday?
Oh man, it was like the best. Like in a way, last year we kind of like somewhat complained about playing on the Saturday and then whatever. But this year it was like, okay, it was a long wait on Saturday. I will say, like, I was trying to keep myself busy all day, doing errands, just trying to take my mind off of stuff. I honestly didn't even watch much of the Bengals Raiders game until the very end when we were getting ready to come on and do our pregame. So I was trying to keep myself busy, and then just the throttling made my Sunday just so great. 3 games to watch on Sunday, not a care in the world, just stress-free. And it was really nice, right? I was just like watching the other games, knowing that we had already won was just really great.
My phone died like 4 times from all the tweeting that I was doing. I was just tweeting so much that it like killed all of the battery on my phone. Jason M coming in says, so happy that Judge having his dad over didn't curse us. That's actually this weekend. My dad's flying into town on Thursday. Again, the last playoff game me and my dad watched together was the Music City Miracles. So we do have that to worry about this Sunday as he arrives into town this week. They won, so now we get to watch the games together. Funny story. So I did the pregame show before the Patriots live from my old house. Last day I was in that house before I moved to this house. Midway through the second quarter, internet went out. They decided to shut off the internet at about 7 o'clock West Coast time out here, and just like my internet just shut down. And I'm like, why is the TV not working? Because I have YouTube TV. I'm just streaming the TV. So I literally watched 3/4 of that game on my phone. I had myself like a headache by the end of that game. I was like watching on my phone. But yeah, I watched most of that beat down on my phone. Thank God for technology. I would have been scrambling to a bar if it wasn't for it being, 2022. Luckily, I got like 3 bars from my house. But yeah, crisis averted, being able to watch that game on my phone. But before we really dig into it tonight, talk, in depth about the Patriots game, talk about the Chiefs game coming up next week. Let's just take a moment to reflect on what the Buffalo Bills offense and Josh Allen did on Saturday. 7 possessions, 7 touchdowns, not counting that 8th possession where it's kneeled. Josh Allen was 21 of 25, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 308 yards in the air, 66 on the ground. I mean, it was the highest graded quarterback performance in almost every single metric, QBR, Pro Football Focus, whatever metric you look at. It was the highest graded quarterback statistic in almost every metric. Josh Allen's game, no sacks, no turnovers, no field goals, no punts. Hadn't been done since the 1940s era Chicago Bears. People have said, like, as I was watching it, I didn't think about it. But as I start to hear other people talk about this football game, number one, was that the best offensive performance in the history of professional football? And 2, was that the best quarterbacking performance in the history of professional football? I don't know why. I enjoyed the game thoroughly, and statistically I see it all. but just something's not vibing with me where I don't know if it is. Maybe it's because we only scored 47. It wasn't like a 60 burger or something like that, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on just that offensive performance historically? Is that the best offensive performance ever? The best quarterbacking performance ever?
Best quarterbacking performance ever. That is tough. I mean, 25 attempts, 21 for 25. Obviously, there were some really good highlight plays in there, but I mean, near perfect quarterback rating. I don't know if it's the best quarterbacking performance ever. That is a bold statement because
I think Randy might have hit the nail on the head here.
Efficient. That's a good way to put it. I mean, because again, only 25 attempts. The Bills actually ran the ball more times in this game than they threw the ball. So it's hard for me to say it's the most, dominant quarterback performance ever. I could say maybe it's the most dominant offensive performance ever for a team, given the 7 touchdowns on the 7 drives. But I mean, Josh Allen did have the 5 TDs. I'm not taking that in. I'm certainly not taking anything away from him. But I would say you have to give credit to the collective offense here and say, like, if you're going to say that, then maybe it's the most dominant offensive performance in a playoff game. Yeah. It's easily, for me, the most satisfying Bills win probably I've ever seen. Right? I mean, that's for
100%,
sure.
100%. And Chris S comes in and says, I think if it was a shootout, it would feel different. But because we dominated, it was kind of, Like I understand that too. And just like it was only 308 yards, but you also got to think about the conditions that they were playing in and the efficiency that Randy was talking about. Like I was, seriously, like I was racking my brain trying to think of what was the best quarterbacking performance I'd ever seen. I couldn't really think of a professional example off the top of my head. I haven't sat down and gone on my computer and like done the research. Like obviously there are some like crazy like 500-yard games and stuff like that Drew Brees and Peyton Manning's have had of the world. But the only thing I could think of off the top of my head was Joe Burrow at LSU. Like that was the only thing that popped into my head was that streak he had against Georgia in the SEC championship game, then Oklahoma and Clemson, where he had 16 touchdowns, no interceptions over 3 games. He had that semifinal with like 7 touchdowns. I literally couldn't think of any professional quarterback performance that was better than what Josh Allen put out.
The one game that comes to mind to me, and this is just because I've kind of also followed the Broncos very closely over the years because my best friend's a Broncos fan, was that opening week game that Denver played against the Ravens when Peyton Manning threw the 7 touchdowns in the one game. I mean, that game was pretty spectacular from Peyton Manning. So, I mean, there are a handful of games out there, but again, this was playoffs. This was against a division rival, a team that had kind of owned you for 20 years. So you start adding all these qualifications to what this game really meant for the Bills as a franchise. And it really adds up to being one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive wins, one of the most impressive wins in franchise history. Obviously, the 51-3 Raiders playoff game from years ago has probably got this one beat. But, I mean, for the franchise, it means so much as well. So all of these things collectively, and as Randy put in the comments, the biggest FU that McDermott has ever given out as a coach to Belichick. We saw how salty he was at the end of the game with the handshake. And I know he's kind of always like that, but I mean, McDermott, you could tell he had that kind of jaw out, like that Bill Cowher jaw was out for McDermott throughout the game. And he was going for blood, man. He was going for blood. And I think we lost Steve, but I will just continue this party. Richard comes in, says, best performance by a QB, Fitz bare-chested. Randy saying it was an absolute masterpiece by Daboll. Jessica saying against the second best scoring defense, number 1 red zone defense. That's the other thing that we should be talking about too when you talk about this game in the context of historical performances, because really the Bills were favored. I know that, but in actuality, like there wasn't a consensus across like the media really that the Bills, were a shoo-in to win this game. They were supposed to win. People were picking the Pats. People talking about Mac Jones, Belichick figuring out the Bills after playing them twice. Like he was going to have something up his sleeve. I thought it was going to be a lower scoring game. I thought it was going to be a boxing match, like I said in the pregame. So it really was just a big FU from McDermott and really Dayball as well to that Pats defense who legitimately had no answers. I don't know if you saw, Steve, but if in the comments section as well, what Colin Cowherd was saying today about Josh Allen and him just being like unworldly and like Belichick throwing every possible scheme and possible defensive play at him and having no answer for him.
And I honestly, to me, I saw Belichick's panic more in his offensive performance and the way they philosophically tried to attack the Bills offensively than anything they did on defense. I mean, on defense, it looks like Bill Belichick just had, no answers. It was crazy. I mean, we've seen some of these Belichick defenses have to be bailed out before. Tom Brady had to bail out Bill Belichick against, on a number of occasions, thinking back to like the Atlanta Super Bowl. They put up a ton of points in the Eagles when the Eagles were able to beat that defense and score a ton of points in that defense. So Brady's had to dig out Belichick on a number of occasions. Obviously, he's had his Super Bowls where he's just dominated. I mean, he had Sean McVay's number, but that was back when Brian Flores was there. But they came out on offense and they were throwing the ball and they were using 3 receiver sets. And I was shook. I was shocked. I could not believe the New England Patriots were doing that and putting themselves in these like 3rd and long situations and just digging themselves into a hole and having these short possessions and just giving the ball back to the Buffalo Bills. I thought that Mac Jones would have thrown the football 15 to 20 times in this game. It was shocking to me how they came out tossing the football. It was like Belichick maybe outsmarted himself with that game plan, or he was so worried that Josh Allen was going to put up points no matter what that he knew he had to do that from the get-go. I can't tell which one is which.
I will say this, though. I mean, it was a little bit frustrating on the drive that ended up resulting in the Micah Hyde interception. The Patriots frustratingly converted a couple 3rd downs before that happened. Mac Jones scrambling for one. I mean, that was a little frustrating. It was 2 different occasions. I think it might have been 2 different occasions where Mac Jones scrambled. I can't remember exactly now because it's kind of a blur. But really, that Micah Hyde interception, I think, really turned the tide of the game at that point. Like the Patriots, to their credit, like they were kind of moving the ball down the field somewhat and kind of frustrating the Bills on that drive. And at that point, it was only 7-0. And then the other questionable thing I thought early in the game was, I know they were on like their own 35-ish, but like the Pats had that like 4th and inches or 4th and 1, and they didn't go for it, knowing how well the Bills offense was playing at that point. It might have been 14-0 at that point.
Didn't they have a punt inside the 50 with like down 2 touchdowns too?
Yeah, it might have been that one. That I thought was really odd, and it was like a pretty like short 4th down, if I recall. It might not have been exactly on the 50, but it was borderline where you might go for it. So that I thought was interesting. And then obviously at that point, once like we said, the Bills get up by 2 scores. I mean, man, that's just a recipe for success for the Bills defense.
So Devin E comes in and says the Bills last 20 possessions against the Pats, no punts. There was a great tweet from Bleacher Report Gridiron today. Every Bills drive the last 2 games versus the Patriots. So here are every drive for the last 2 games: touchdown, field goal, turnover on downs. That was the goal line where we didn't convert, where Zach Moss tripped all over himself. Touchdown, end of half, field goal, touchdown, kneel, touchdown, end of half, touchdown, kneel. Literally, those were the Buffalo Bills offensive possessions. It was pretty much either a touchdown, a couple of field goals, and a couple of like halves and kneels. That's essentially what you got the last 2 games. Just an utter domination. It just seems like the Buffalo Bills have an answer for Bill Belichick. That Patriots team is pretty flawed, right? Like Mac Jones is only going to take them so far. The comp I'm hearing the most for him is the dude's Chad Pennington. So if the dude is Chad Pennington, you're going to need to surround him with perfection on offense. And then once you surround, and they don't have that, like they have a bunch of number 3 receivers. They don't have a number 1 or even really a number 2 receiver. They have 2 really good tight ends who they massively overpaid. They have an offensive line that's pretty solid at run blocking, but iffy pass blocking. And then their defense is old and busted. JC Jackson is an all-pro. Bullshit. Like that is JC Jackson might be the most overrated all pro in the history of all pros. The dude is an average corner who lucks into a bunch of interceptions because of the defense that he plays on. And people think he's good. He's pretty much like Trayvon Diggs. Trayvon Diggs has been roasted for like the most yards of any corner this year. But to go along with being roasted for the most yards of any corner this year, he's also got 11 interceptions to go along with it. So people think he's good when in reality, it's more luck than really being good. JC Jackson, Stephon Diggs just fucking owns the dude. Like absolutely owns him. Their safeties are old, their linebackers are old, their defensive line is thin. I tweeted the other day, I'm like, Belichick should just like hang it up, or Robert Kraft should ask him to hang it up because they need to reset there in New England. That's not something this wasn't a playoff season for New England that they can build off of. They need to tear that shit down. Like they are a bunch of dudes, Hightower, Slater, McCourty, they're all gone. And John Herring comes in. They're old news. They are absolutely old news. The only reason they even got a victory against us this season was because it was windy. That's it.
I will say that going into the season, I did think they had constructed a roster out of all the teams in the AFC East, and go back and look at our shows before the season that was most ready to give the Bills problems. What I didn't expect was that it would kind of fall apart as fast as it did, because I did think they were still going to have a very good defense this year. And I thought they were going to be a very good running team. And I liked the fact that they brought in Hunter Henry and John. Like, I thought the moves they made in the offseason, they did overpay, I think, for Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, excuse me. But it all, like we said, in the offseason starts and ends with the quarterback for them. And whether that was Cam Newton in the beginning or Mac Jones, that's what we said was going to be the difference between how this Patriots team handled themselves this season. And they were good enough to make the playoffs, obviously, but they only went really as far as their quarterback could take them. I still don't think their defense is bad. I mean, they have some aging guys, I agree, and they have some nice players on offense. Let's not forget, like, Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson did torch us, pretty badly. So it's not like they're bad players and they have a good offensive line, you said, but they're only going to go as far as that quarterback was going to take them. And honestly, outside of Ben Roethlisberger and even maybe Ben Roethlisberger, they had the worst quarterback in the playoffs of any team in the playoffs. So, and it didn't take them far. And that's what happened.
JD Plett comes in and says they built that team just to beat the Bills. And yeah, that's something that, back when, producer Kendall was a part of the show, Kendall Mirsky, he mentioned that in our offseason shows. Bill Belichick built this Patriots roster because he thought the Buffalo Bills were soft, and he knew the Buffalo Bills were the kings of the AFC East. Bill Belichick built that roster for the weather conditions that you saw on Saturday and the weather conditions that you saw on Monday Night Football. Bill Belichick was like, all right, we'll get through the early parts of the season. As the weather starts to get crappy, we'll get on a roll. We'll sneak into the playoffs, and then we'll do damage in the postseason because we will be tougher than other teams at the line of scrimmage, and we will be grittier than them, and we will play smarter football than them. They thought they could bully the Buffalo Bills. But the only problem is since the second half of that Tampa Bay game, the Buffalo Bills have learned how to be a bully themselves. I mean, that offensive line for the Buffalo Bills with Mitch Morse in the pin and pulls, Ryan Bates and the athleticism he brings to left guard, Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown playing absolutely out of their mind, Darrell Williams is solid at right guard, and then even Tommy Doyle, tight end number 2, Tommy Doyle, is roasting people. As the 6 offensive linemen in some of these sets, Reggie Gilliam is setting massive blocks.
Yeah,
our receivers are playing uber physical in the running game. And then on defense, Harrison Phillips and Ed Oliver have stepped up and allowed our linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, to be the best versions of themselves. So the joke was on Bill Belichick because the Buffalo Bills were completely opposite of what Bill Belichick thought we were. You know how that old Dennis Green, they were who we thought they were? The Buffalo Bills were not who Bill Belichick thought they were. Dawson Knox, too, in the run game. Absolutely just crushed them that game.
But it's not like the Bills have been that all year, right? It's really only been, like you said, since maybe like the second half of that Tampa game. This is the Bills team, the ceiling that we saw against the Patriots, the version of the Bills team we saw against the Patriots. And really, for a lot of this last stretch of 4 games, right? Not all of it, but for most of it, the ceiling of the Bills team that we thought could be there all year. We got spoiled last year with those huge winning streak we had after the bye, and obviously after the Hail Murray, we went on that huge winning streak and we're hot going into the playoffs. The Bills right now, after that Pats loss, and then coming back and beating Carolina, beating the Pats again, beating Atlanta, beating the Jets, they are hot at the right time. Like I mentioned, they had the longest winning streak going into the playoffs, tied with the Raiders. And this first game should tell you how hot they are right now. And if that's the version we get, and that's the version we can get throughout the playoffs, they're going to be very hard to beat. Now, are we going to get that every game? Are we going to get that against the Chiefs? I don't know, but it's in there somewhere. We know it's in there somewhere, and it's likely going to take another similar game like that to beat Kansas City, but we know it's possible. And we've seen it recently, and we've seen it somewhat consistently since this offensive line has come together and this running game has gotten going, and this team is a lot more balanced and they can hurt you in many different ways. There is now that threat that teams have to respect, and it's a lot more difficult to defend. And we already knew they had the great defense. So this team is really peaking, I hope, at the right time. I just hope they didn't peak. Like, I hope this wasn't the peak, right? so we'll see. But
oh no, we blew our load against the Patriots. We got nothing left. If anyone, but let's talk about some of the other offensive performances. We started sort of outside of Josh Allen, touching on the offensive line. I mentioned like Dawkins and Brown and Tommy Doyle have just been awesome in the run game, even pass blocking too. Dawkins and Spencer Brown. That Josh Allen touchdown where he thought he was throwing the ball away and Dawson Knox came down with it. Spencer Brown on that play.
I tweeted, I was like, was he throwing that away? Because it certainly looked like he was throwing it out of the end zone.
He admitted post-game he was throwing that ball away. But if you go back and watch that play closely, Spencer Brown is just following Josh Allen as he's scrambling and just knocking dudes out of the way and just pretty much just like mimicking all of Josh Allen's movements. It was absolutely incredible. The dancing bear, Spencer Brown that you saw there, they haven't allowed really very much in terms of sacks the past 4 or 5 games. They didn't allow a sack this game. I don't believe they allowed a sack against the Jets. Did they allow a sack against the Falcons? I don't think they have allowed a sack in 3 games. I don't know that 100%.
I'll fact check that one.
And then you even have like the masters of sensibility, guys like Greg and Eric and Aaron and Bruce.
No sacks since the Panthers game. They weren't sacked against New England either.
The kings of sensibility, the guys who bring everyone back down to earth, are even starting to go out there on Twitter and go out there on their shows and talk about just how impressive Ryan Bates is at left guard and what his athleticism brings to the left guard spot. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, like obviously there's still some games to play and it could all fall apart miserably against a guy like Chris Jones. We're going to get to that when we start previewing the Chiefs game. But Ryan Bates is making an argument that this offensive line is solidified and just adding some more competition and depth in the offseason is the way to go. I mean, who would have thought that at the beginning of the season? Morris's pin in polls, him just getting to that second level, utilizing Isaiah McKenzie, all the different things the Buffalo Bills are doing to supplement that run game. What are your thoughts in general about what the way the offensive line is playing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I previewed it on the playoff extravaganza show. I talked about it on our pregame. The offensive line coming together, it's no coincidence. Devin Singletary's game has even elevated further. He was the most consistent back all year. Going into this playoff game, he had averaged 81 yards on the ground per game over the final 4 games of the regular season. Running hard in combination with that now consistent offensive line play. Rick Bates there at left guard, Spencer Brown making his name at right tackle, and Darrell Williams holding his own at right guard. Again, I don't know what this means as far as what this holds for the Bills in the offseason, if they prioritize or reprioritize what they want to do with this offensive line. But for right now, it's working. It's working for this playoff run. And we're just going to ride the wave of this offensive line play now for the rest of the playoff run, because last year, this line was really, really good at pass blocking. We saw how much they struggled in run blocking against the Chiefs in that AFC Championship game. It looks like they have a newfound confidence now in the run game, run blocking, and that in combination with Devin Singletary running better than he did last year and Josh Allen running more than he did last year and in the right moments, it creates a lot of problems for opposing defenses. So I really like what I'm seeing. this Bills team truly now is balanced. Like I said, they ran the ball more. I know this is a factor of them being up big, but they still ran the ball more. The Buffalo Bills ran the ball more in a playoff game with Josh Allen as their quarterback than they did throw the ball. Like, let that sink in. Josh Allen only had to throw the ball 25 times, I know, but probably not going to be the case against Kansas City. But even still, the fact that they were able to do that against New England,
that goes back to why we're struggling to call it the best quarterback performance ever, because it wasn't just like in your face statistics. It was just straight pure efficiency. Like, of the 25 more touchdowns and incompletions, like it's just
precision, efficiency, amazing.
He was just dropping every single time he dropped back. He was just putting his ball sack on every single New England Patriot defender. I mean, they could. Every throw was just a fuck you.
I'll say this: I think Stephon Diggs could have had a touchdown on that play down the sideline if he didn't kind of stutter step and wait for the ball. I mean, I know he was just trying to adjust, but man. And those were just such nicely thrown passes, man.
You made a great comment a couple of shows ago when we were talking about that Mina Kimes tweet about how Josh Allen is sort of balancing that like guy who says fuck you and just makes all these crazy plays with a guy who checks the ball down. And I was like, yeah, I want to see Josh Allen take those checkdowns like he did in that first New England game. But you made a great point. You made a great point that it's not like that's his first read. This dude was going through his progressions before he found Dawson Knox underneath.
Exactly.
He was going through all of his progressions before he found Devin Singletary underneath. He literally scans the field, and he can do it so quickly that he can still get to his check down, or he can still buy himself enough time with his athleticism to get to the check down. Just absolutely incredible. And just even, again, speaking to his athleticism, that Dawson Knox touchdown that we all thought was a throwaway was the most time a quarterback's had to throw a ball. It was the longest play.
Almost 10 seconds. Almost
10 seconds. Longest play this year in the National Football League. So absolutely insane. Randy says his favorite touchdown was the Gabe Davis touchdown, where he picked up the dang ball like a shortstop. Impressive catch by Gabriel Davis. My personal favorite was the Dawson Knox, the second one. That was a fucking piss missile. And Dawson Knox caught that second touchdown. To me, that one
it was not a touchdown, but the play where we were up big and Josh naked bootlegged out to the right and threw it over the head of the defender, and Dawson Knox almost scored again. That throw was pretty too, man.
Even the Gabriel Davis 20-yarder early on
was across the
field, across the body. Yeah. Absolutely. Like I said, he was just dropping his ball sack on those New England defenders.
Underrated throw too. The sidearm one to Beasley around the defenders.
Oh yeah. And they even showed if that was Patrick Mahomes and Chris Collinsworth, he probably would have had to go take a 2-minute break. Actually, Chris Collinsworth, he probably would have had to go take a 20-second break. But the way he just threw it in there like a shortstop, it was absolutely crazy. The arm angle that he took there. Looking at some of the other offensive performances, Devin Singletary. The powers and the packs. I mean, Eric was breaking down Devin Singletary's runs and the way that he was making his offensive line better because he was maneuvering and cutting in a way that set up blocks. And his personal trainer from his time in Florida was talking about that burst you're seeing, that explosion you're seeing from Devin Singletary wasn't there last season. It is there this season. And Devin Singletary went off 81 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. He added 13 yards in the air. We got to get Zach this offseason together with Singletary's personal trainer down there in Florida, because maybe Zach Moss can maybe salvage himself as RB2 if he can get himself some of that burst and explosion. But Devin Singletary, I made the comment watching the game. Number one, we might not be able to afford a second contract if he keeps playing the way he's playing. Next year might be his last year as a Buffalo Bill. And he's looking like a guy who next year, if the Bills can carry this over, obviously things can change. Brian Dable might be gone, et cetera, et cetera. But if the Bills can carry this over into next season and carry this balance over into next season, I mean, Devin Singletary is looking like a dude. If the Bills offense was clicking like that from week one, the offensive line was clicking like that from week one, Kyler Murray just threw a pick 6. What a fucking idiot. He was about to get sacked. If Devin Singletary was playing like this from week one, this offense was playing like this from week one, he could have rushed for 1,400 yards, double-digit touchdowns. The dude's absolutely on fire.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
Kyler Murray looked like rookie Josh Allen, right? What Kyler Murray just did is what everybody in the national media thinks that Josh Allen does on a regular basis, by the way. I don't know if you're watching this, but he was about to get sacked for a safety, and he tossed the ball underhand, right to the Rams corner for a touchdown instead of a safety. So he gave them 5 extra points there.
And Dylan comes in and says Motor's second TD was great. That vision and cutback, and he was doing that all game. I mean, Eric broke down a really nice the nice play. I think it was must have been on a third down. I think where he got kind of ahead of the play. The defender was in the gap. The gap was wide open. He cut it back to the inside to allow Mitch Morse to come out and get the block, and then cut it back to the outside, going to the left to get the first down. That's the type of stuff that really good running backs with good vision do and sort of separate themselves, right? Jason says Singletary showing he has the best vision. It's clear. I mean, Zach Moss has been running into guys' backs for a long time. It's the biggest notice. Yeah, it's the biggest difference you notice when Moss gets in. And it is important for those extra little bit of yards you need to get those first downs. And to not get stuffed and to not lose yards and to get those extra couple yards. He did it on a couple different occasions last night.
And this goes to show you, because we're going to get to Dawson Knox next. Every situation is different, right? There's, I always used to say, like, there's something to say about development. There's something to say about a player gaining like their sea legs in the league. Sometimes it takes 2-3 years to click. Sometimes you're too patient, Cody Ford, right? Like sometimes, you know what? They just suck. But other times I still remember, I used to listen to the Buffalo Beat Pack podcast back when it was Matthew Fairburn and Joe Biscaglia. And Matthew Fairburn had really nice access that year. Brandon Beane brought him in after the draft and sat down with him and watched tape on Devin Singletary from FAU with Matthew Fairburn as Matthew Fairburn was interviewing him. And Brandon Beane was just completely like ensorcelled with Devin Singletary. He talked about how he could just get open in a phone booth and his vision and his contact balance. And Brandon Beane just talked about all these different things about Devin Singletary. Yes, he's a 4.6 guy, but look what you see on tape. And what you see on tape, he thought could translate to the National Football League. And you're starting to see that now. But it turns out Brandon Beane might have been wrong about Devin Singletary because the athleticism might have been his undoing. But Devin Singletary, who had all the traits to be a great running back, made it a point this offseason to go there and add the trait, add the thing he was missing, that burst and explosion. He might still not be a 4.4 guy, right? He still might not be like a 4.3 guy. He's not going to take one. He's not going to house one from 80 yards or 75 yards. But he did just enough. He added just enough burst and explosion to go along with all those other traits to make himself a very, very good football player in the National Football League. So you got to give most of the credit there and the development of Devin Singletary straight up to Devin Singletary. Like, I really don't think this is so much like a coach schemed something different or, a coach taught him something. I literally think that this is something where Devin Singletary took the onus upon himself, went out and did something, and it made him that much better because everything but the burst and explosion was there to make Devin Singletary a very, very good running back.
It was, and he had an opportunity. He looked at this situation and he was like, probably like, hey, Bills fans clamoring for a star running back, Bills fans clamoring to draft Travis Etienne, clamoring to draft whoever. Obviously there was a faction that were anti early running back, but like Zach Moss was there. A lot of people going in the season were like, oh, I think Zach Moss is turning to shine. Like he's going to take over these duties, but really it's been Singletary the whole time. And we knew how much work he put in the off season. So while it is nice to see this now, I think maybe people thought it would either happen sooner or maybe not happen at all. And now that we're seeing some of the dividends pay off from all that work, I think a lot of it too is the fact that the Bills finally decided to let one guy handle most of the totes, right? And getting these guys and getting him into rhythm, giving him a chance to use that vision, which in my mind, and in my opinion, comes down to a lot of, let's see how my guys are blocking today. Like, give me a couple carries to get in the game flow, see how things are going, see what the defensive line's doing, see what my guys are doing up front. Then you can kind of you can use that vision then on future plays to say like, okay, I now expect this to happen and I can see that on the field. Randy says, Judge is talking nonsense. Everyone knows you can't change from college. Case in point, Josh Allen.
The craziest thing just happened in this Cardinals-Rams game, too. Kyler Murray threw the ball to Rondale Moore, who dropped it. It went right into the hands of the Rams defender, who then also dropped it. And then it went back into the hands of the wide receiver, Rondale Moore, who caught the pass. So Rondale Moore caught it. It slipped out. It was picked off. and then it slipped out from the interception to be caught. And it's just absolutely crazy. The Cardinals are finally showing a pulse on offense too with Chase Edmonds on an end around. But yeah, I mean, and then speaking of development as well, Dawson Knox. We had this conversation all offseason. Dawson Knox in the game, by the way, 5 catches, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus just A++ blocking. The dude was a mauler in the run
Almost
game.
had 3 touchdowns. He's about a yard away.
Yeah, about a yard. Like he's just sitting there. He was sitting there looking at Josh Allen like this. Just this is a guy who in the offseason, the talk was, how long do you wait on this guy to develop? Athletically speaking, as an athlete, Dawson Knox is just as athletically gifted as Travis Kelce, or as a Darren Waller, or as any of these, or these George Kittles. Maybe not Darren Waller because of the height, but you know what I mean? Like he's just as athletically gifted as some of these freaks at tight end that are sort of at the top of the pecking order. It was all about finding consistency with his hands, in his game, etc. And he also put the work in, the jugs machine, working with those hand-eye coordination, all those different people.
Tight end
tight end you, all those different things. And it took him 3 years, and the Rams just got another interception off a dumb Kyler Murray pass. It took him years, but it finally clicked for him, and now he is arguably a top 5 to 10 tight end in the National Football League. Some people might argue he's higher. I would say I want to see it happen for more than a year, but he's definitely a top 10 tight end in the National Football League, now, and he could go even higher.
When you are the number 1 tight end on a team now that is utilizing the tight end more so than it did a year ago, for whatever reasons that, obviously Knox developing further, he's really the only guy now. He's not splitting with Tyler Kroft or Lee Smith for that matter, but he's the guy, right? Like he's not splitting reps with Tommy Sweeney. Like Tommy Sweeney was inactive, right? So it's like he's not splitting reps with anyone. He's the guy. He's gotten over the hands demons that he had battled last year. And you can tell that he's just playing with a lot more confidence, right? I mean, one of the plays that we haven't even talked about, which was just amazing, and we always talk about like that Cincinnati play from a couple years ago where he ran that stiff arm he had. It was only like a 7 or 8 yard catch, or maybe even less, but he just abused that dude on the right sideline. And you could even hear Ian Eagle say he made some comment about how he just like owned the dude on the side. Like he is physical. He is confident. He's a huge part of the offense now. And on an offense that's as prolific as the Bills offense is, how could you say he's not put himself into the conversation of being a top 10 tight end in the NFL? Before this season started, I said there were only 3 elite tight ends in the NFL. There was George Kittle, Darren Waller, and Travis Kelce, and then a group of guys behind those 3, like TJ Hawkinson, Zach Ertz, whatever. I think Knox is in that second group now. He can make his way into elite status, but like he is now, to me, clearly in that second group with the likes of Hawkinson, with the likes of Ertz. Like he's there. He's in that group, which is a very small group as well, right? It's not easy to be in a group like that.
Yeah, and Jessica comes in and says, didn't you want to get rid of Knox? I mean, I might have said that. I say some stupid shit on this show. But to my knowledge, my take on Dawson Knox heading into the season was that he needed to find consistency, that all the athletic traits were there, and that his ceiling, if he can't find his consistency, would always be a TE2, a role player, not a guy who could be an alpha and take over. And that might not be a guy you want to give a second contract to. That was, I don't think that was like a crazy take to have.
No.
Like, okay, the dude needs to find consistency. If not, he's got the athletic traits that if he doesn't find that consistency, another team might try to pay him without him having the production to match. And the Bills might not want to do that. Like they're
not letting this guy out the door.
They're not letting Dawson Knox out the door. His relationship with Josh Allen, Dawson Knox is here to stay.
Bills haven't had a tight end like this maybe ever.
but look around the National Football League. I know these guys were first round picks, so it's a little bit different. David Njoku, OJ Howard, Evan Ingram. All 3 of these tight ends are going to get paid this offseason and have not done a single damn thing to get paid. What has David Njoku done in his career? Nothing. What has OJ Howard done in his career? Nothing. What has Evan Ingram done in his career? Nothing. All these physical freaks like Dawson Knox who are inconsistent, had injuries, didn't have the production to match their talent, that another team was going to overpay this offseason. That would have been Dawson Knox this year, the year after this year, had he not started producing the way he's producing. Now that he's producing the way he's producing, you go pay that man, especially with the relationship he has with Josh Allen. Dawson Knox is the Heath Miller to Josh Allen's like Ben Roethlisberger, right? Like you have that quarterback tight end relationship. I'm not saying that Josh Allen is Ben Roethlisberger and Dawson Knox is Heath Miller, because I think they're both way more athletic than both of those guys. But it's just that type of relationship where these two dudes are going to be in sync, and these two dudes
Tony
are going to play
Romo,
together
Jason
for
Witten.
10 years. There you go. Like these two dudes are going to play together for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Like as these seasons progress, I think Dawson Knox is going to become even more a part of this offense than he is now. You see him starting to take on that sort of alpha role where he could actually be the number 2 target, even though he's not a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Much like Travis Kelce to Tyreek Hill, he's the number 2 option in that offense, right? So that's the role I see for Dawson Knox moving into the future.
And I agree, because we talked about comparing the Bills offense to the Chiefs offense in that AFC Championship preview last year, and we're going to talk about it again a little bit tonight, not to get too much into it because we got our pregame, but like we always talked about how the Chiefs had sort of a guy, a really like star type player at each of the cornerstone positions, right? They had the Tyreek Hill at receiver, they had Travis Kelce at tight end, and whatever you want to say about Clyde Edwards-Helaire or whatever, like Darryl, like they're good running backs, right? Probably at the level of a Devin Singletary, and maybe you could say Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a little better, or a little like whatever. You can say that. The Bills were very receiver dependent, wide receiver heavy last year, right? It was all about Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, Stephon Diggs, John Brown for a stretch. The tight end was not really part of that offense to the extent that like a Travis Kelce is for Kansas City. But now the Bills may be going more towards that, right? Where you have that situation where you have your alpha receiver in Diggs. Maybe you do have your alpha tight end now in Knox. And then those secondary receivers like the Mecole Hardmans and the DeMarcus Robinsons, like the Chiefs have, are now even more like, how nice is it to have those as like second, third, fourth options, where you have like a Gabriel Davis or an Emmanuel Sanders and a Cole Beasley now as like third, fourth, and fifth options, right? So it's a really good situation for the Bills to be in, right?
And I want to get back to that in one second, but before we do, a couple of great comments here. John DeMarshi coming in. Knox has 16 touchdowns in his last 22 starts. That's insane. Absolutely insane production. Jessica Tennis comes in and says, Kelce saw Knox's pass, a 2-point conversion with a broken hand, and said, no, now I need a pass for a touchdown. Chiefs looked like a little jealous last night too. Patrick Mahomes saw Josh Allen throw for 5 touchdowns. He had to throw for 5 touchdowns too. Travis Kelce, he knows that Dawson Knox had that 2-point conversion, so he had to go one up him and try to get a touchdown. So Chiefs are just trying to keep pace with the Bills right now. So it'd be nice to watch them next week and all try to one up each other on the football field. Could make for a quite an epic football game. But you mentioned the receivers, and you mentioned like how Kansas City has Mecole Hardman and DeMarcus Robinson. It seems like right now the Buffalo Bills receiving core in general, tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, they all know their role, right? Diggs is the guy you pepper. Knox is a guy that Josh Allen looks to. Gabriel Davis is a guy who can get those chunk yards, and he's the guy you look to in the red zone. Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, they know their role. They're going to make a big play or a clutch play here and there. Nobody outside of maybe Stephon Diggs is clamoring for the football, nor should anyone really outside maybe Knox and Diggs clamor for the football. Everyone just seems to know their role. It's meshing. It's working. Isaiah McKenzie's coming in there in a gadget way as well as a receiving way. Everybody knows their role. Everyone knows what they're doing. And it's just all blending perfectly right now in terms of the way this receiver room is operating.
It is. And it's an unselfish room, obviously. There's never, it's funny. You never hear a word about things going on with the locker room, like players complain, like that stuff doesn't happen coming out of the Bills organization. And like, we would see it if it was, right? Because we're on social media all the time. We're following all these people. Like, we would see it. It's not happening. This group, this offensive skill position group knows that if they just do what they're supposed to do. Yeah, Manny Sands showed up out of nowhere. Yeah, he made his mark on the game, right? And we kind of were getting on his case a little bit before the game. It's like he's kind of hasn't made a big impact the last stretch of games, but that touchdown obviously was was a huge point in the game. It put the Bills up, I think, by 4 scores at that point, and so pretty much sealed the game. I think that put him up 30-3. John says, O-line has allowed pressures, but Josh has not been sacked in 4 weeks. Bates isn't Larry Allen or John Hanna, but he was the missing link, and that's
100%.
also 100% true with the consistency factor as well.
And Eric has been posting a ton of videos isolating Ryan Bates and talking about just how his strength and his athleticism allows Mitch Morse to do other things. Mitch Morse isn't trying to compensate for the guy next to him, and that is allowing the Buffalo Bills offensive line to do so much more. So kudos to Ryan Bates for filling that role and just being able to do his fucking 111th. You know what I'm saying? Like not having to have someone else baby him, in order to be successful and bring the rest of the offense down with him. But all right, we've talked a bunch about offense, defense. Here's what I have to say about the defense, because we're already 46 minutes in. We haven't even mentioned the defense yet. Here's my take on the defense, and let me know if you think I'm being a little outlandish here. The Micah Hyde interception was jaw-dropping, right? Like absolutely amazing. One of the better defensive plays of the season, maybe one of the better defensive plays of like the last decade. Some people are saying it's the best interception they've ever seen. But outside of that, I just felt like everyone on defense did their 111th, and it wasn't like the most special defensive performance of all time. Am I underselling the way the defense played today or on Saturday?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, the defense has had their time in the sun multiple games this year. They've been highly accoladed statistically, obviously number 1 points per game defense, number 1 yards per game defense. This was a good defensive performance. I'm not taking anything away from the defensive performance, but the Patriots were 50% on third downs. They did get over 300 total yards. I know a lot of that was the Bills eased up and kind of and I think that's probably part of it, right? Is the Bills got up so big that we didn't really need to
do anything
hone
crazy
in so much on the defensive side of the ball and do anything crazy. All we had to do was keep things in front of us, not give them cheap scores, cheap big plays, and that's all we really had to do was just play sound.
You can say cheapies.
Defense.
You can say cheapies. I know you wanted to say cheapies.
No cheapies. And we sacked Mac Jones 3 times. So I mean, like we got the 2 interceptions. Levi's pick was awesome off the tip, obviously, and then Micah's was great. So there were some nice flashes. The defense, I would say the defense wasn't really tested this game, but that's fine. Like they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They were tested a little bit early. Micah Hyde got the pick to kind of change the tide of the game, but they just did exactly what they were supposed to do.
They talked about they asked Sean McDermott that in the post-game presser. That really might have been really the turning point of the game, not allowing New England to get a score there. John DeMarchi coming into, rightfully so, that second interception, to keep the Patriots from even considering a comeback. Matt Milano with a great tip, just doing his thing in zone defense for Levi Wallace.
I like this too. This was one of my favorites. The fake spike was just such an FU to them. Oh my God, it was great.
I knew it was. I was watching on TV and I knew that motherfucker was going to do that. Like everyone knew Mac Jones was going to do that. Star Lotulelei had a big play too.
Yeah, that was huge nice. Because that came after the pass interference call on Levi, which gave the Pats a first down on that was a third down. Star gets the sack, and then obviously, that was I think that was the series where the Pats punted. When they were like around the 50-yard line, I'm pretty sure was on that one. But then again, that was like that ended up being like a 4th and 7 or 8. So whatever. But that was a huge play because they got the cheap pass interference call. Then Starr comes back with the sack, puts them really behind the chains. And then the Pats couldn't obviously convert the first down. So, little moments like that were big. That pass interference wasn't a big fan of that. But we have to be ready. Like we have to mentally prepare ourselves for that to happen probably more than once next week. We just have to be ready. Next week it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Just be ready for it. It's gonna happen.
We'll do like a little mini preview here towards the end, because we're probably gonna want to make this show last at least through the halftime of this football game, and there's about one minute left in the first half. So we'll do a little previewing towards the end of the show. But defense, special teams. Tyler Bass blocked extra point, miss extra point. Just I think a frozen football sort of just affected him. That's probably not going to be a concern in Kansas City. It might rear its ugly head if we have to come back to Buffalo to play the Bengals. It probably won't be an issue in Tennessee. I'm not too worried about Tyler Bass. Nomad Hawk is always a plus. And Micah
Love
Hyde.
seeing him not in the box score. Yeah.
Micah Hyde, not only did he protect the football, dude had a touchdown to Tyrell Dodson and trip him up. Like, so Micah Hyde was, you don't want it to be permanent, right? Like, this is not something we want to be like Micah Hyde, their punt returner next year. That's not something we want. I'm on the Baxton Berrios free agency train. But for now, Micah Hyde's showing that he's more than just a guy who can fair catch it. He's showing that he can give you a little bit of pop.
There's a little pop. He's making the right, well, from what we've seen so far, obviously in the Jets game in this, he's a good decision maker. We already knew that. That's why they're putting him back there. He's going to make the right decision. Obviously, that one that kind of bounced to him, we've seen this happen a couple times this year where that bounce almost in some ways gets you a little forward momentum, right? And you can kind of make something happen out of that. And you're right. He almost did take one of the house. And we know he's got experience returning punts from his days in Green Bay. So you trust him back there. Obviously, after that interception, you're not going to question the hands, right? So you know he's going to catch the ball when he's back there. And he looks confident doing it, right? Like, he doesn't look like a guy who's doing it because the coaches don't have another option. He looks like he's very comfortable back there. So while I don't think any of us really want that to be the permanent solution, look, the Bills, like they're doing with Rick Bates now and like finding something there, they're going with what they've got on the roster and they're trying to make things work. And so I'll give them credit for having it. I mean, that's not an easy decision to make. I don't think, if you're Sean McDermott, to put your starting second team all pro free safety back there to return punts. Like that takes a little bit of tough decision making to do that.
Jessica Tennis coming in saying, Judge, 2 blocked extra points. The video, the second one's blocked also. I missed that. So thank you for pointing that out to me. Like I said, I was watching on my phone, so I couldn't like go back and forth between Twitter.
Hard to see that block on the phone.
And I was too busy retweeting all the national people drooling over Josh Allen that I must have missed. Somebody pointing out that second blocked one. So thank you, Jessica, for pointing that out. Coaching, Brian Daboll. I mean, just when he interviewed with Chicago Bears and the Miami Dolphins today, he just popped that game on, that 15-minute condensed replay of the Buffalo's offense.
What great timing for him to do some interviews, for himself.
An absolute masterclass from Brian Daboll. Everything. And here's what I'm struggling with, right? Like, you see the way that he used Isaiah McKenzie to supplement the run game, right? And the way he used Isaiah McKenzie in this and all these different things that he's doing to supplement the run game. Is it really like Ryan Bates is here, so now this all works? Is it really we were all like, were they saving it for the playoffs? Like what is it? Was it just it's all clicking at the right time? Was it Brian Daboll saving? I'm not. The Bills were one of the best offenses in the league this year. Don't get me wrong. But there were wrinkles that you've been seeing in some of these games, some of these bigger games that you don't see in some of the smaller games. And it makes me think that Brian Daboll holds stuff back. Are you on the same train here?
I mean, he was clearly holding stuff back the last few weeks of the season, right? Against Atlanta and the Jets. Like, those games were very vanilla. And it seemed like early in the season, maybe we were doing that. We did have some wrinkles there in the middle stretches of the season, some interesting stuff getting Isaiah McKenzie involved there. But some of these swing plays out to McKenzie out of the backfield. There was even one where Josh threw it backwards to McKenzie. It went down as a running play that McKenzie ended up taking it. But like, my favorite one was that swing out to him where he just used his speed to just take away the angle of the defender. And I know we've seen Isaiah McKenzie on a lot of different plays on offense doing different things. That one play that got maybe like 12 yards, that might have been the fastest I've ever seen him run on an offensive play. Like, that dude looked fast on that. But no, I think it's a combination, right? I think it's the Bills are kind of clicking. There is something to being in a rhythm as a play caller, right? Like, we've heard a lot of analysts talk about that. Like, you get into a rhythm and things just start kind of like clicking in your head and clicking with the flow of the game. And you see that sort of happen here. And I think that it makes it a little bit easier when you score early, right? And I think scoring early is a differentiator for this Bills team as far as how that kind of then flows into the play calling for the rest of the game. We've seen it in the past last year too. When the Bills score early, like it's a snowball effect, right? They end up just starting to get rolling. It's when they don't start early or they start slow, it seems to be a struggle for them to come back, and they do eventually kind of find the rhythm and they get it going. But starting fast is really important to this team, I think. And that really sets Brian Dable up, I think, for the remainder of the game.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like now that you've said that and like verbalized it and I've heard it, like that really clicks with me mentally. That it's off to a hot start. Typically, the offense starts to roll, and you start to see these huge curb stompings that we see the Buffalo Bills lay on some of these teams. John Herring comes in and says, "I think that Dable's going to get a head coach. He's going to struggle because none of those quarterbacks are Josh Allen." That is something that you have to consider. Like, will Dable be able to adapt when his quarterback is not an absolute freak show? Like that's going to be something that head coaches or owners and GM are going to be asking him in some of these and things that we're going to have to see. I think Brian Dable has earned the head coaching gig, not even just because of the X's and O's, right? Sometimes it's more than X's and O's. Like one of the things that I want to give Sean McDermott credit for, and I have it in my notes here, is just like the way that Sean McDermott is sort of the CEO of the Buffalo Bills and the way he prepares the team each and every week. They were prepared for the elements this week. You had the chicken broth. You had the equipment team ready to get Allen his sleeves at the last minute. You've seen the injury management all season, whether it's those brand like it goes unnoticed. But the things about being a head coach that Sean McDermott does that are so good, he was instrumental, I think, in convincing the Pagulas to build that new world-class training facility and gym. The rumors came out from Chris Mortensen pregame that the Buffalo Bills are going to build a natural grass field in their new stadium with a heated grass. To me, that's probably Sean McDermott's idea because natural grass probably lessens the chance for injuries. The heating coils underneath gives you less of a chance of having a frozen football field, all those different things. So Sean McDermott is just such a CEO and a delegator, and he does all those things that sort of noticed. And Brian Dable's been seeing that for quite a while now, not to mention that he has worked under Saban, who's also a CEO and a delegator, and Bill Belichick, who is a CEO and a delegator. And on top of that, I still remember this story from the preseason where Brian Dable's like, I want you to stand up. Like, what was it? Stand up if you were a first round pick. And like, everyone like, do you remember that? Do you remember the details of that story where it was like, stand up if you're or sit down. Everyone was standing, like sit down if you weren't a first round pick, and everyone sat down, but like Mitch Trubisky and Josh Allen. And he's like, sit down if you were, your first team didn't believe in you or whatever. And like Mitch Trubisky sat down. He's like, sit down if you had no offers, D1 offers coming out of college. And like John sat down and he gave this like movie-esque like type speech, like every single one of you have been doubted. Every single one of you have been like underestimated, et cetera. Like just sort of pump that team up. And to me, that's how, and all the players talk about it. Gabriel Davis, I remember an interview this offseason, all these players just talk about Brian Dable and his personality and how he cares about his players and the personal relationships he has with them. Like Brian Dable seems ready to be a head coach. It's more than just the X's and the O's. The X's and O's have something to do with it, but I think Brian Dable as a CEO, as a leader, as a guy who can put it all together, I think he's ready, even if it isn't. Like he might not even call. He seems like a kind of guy who might bring, might bring in a guy that he knows from his past to call plays, or he might bring in Shea Tierney, the assistant quarterbacks coach, with him, who seems like his protege. Who knows how ready a guy like Shea Tierney is to call plays, but Brian Dable might not even call plays if he gets a head coaching job because he might have learned that from Sean McDermott, who didn't call plays in Buffalo and let Leslie Frazier do his thing.
I totally think that's kind of the way things are going in the NFL and the way they have been going. Carl says, here's hoping the Ralphs will be back on January 30th. Yeah, if somehow we can get to that situation where the Bengals do take out Tennessee and the Bills take out the Chiefs, that would be the case. And I think that the NFL, to your point, it seems to be those teams that end up having the most success. And like, I'm not talking about like the Andy Reids who've been coaching for a long time, who still calls plays, but like the up and coming sort of successful head coaches. Like I know McVay, he calls plays, but like you watch him on Hard Knocks, the way he runs that organization, like he is like the CEO. I would be looking for a leader, right? That's what I would be looking for. A leader, someone who can make grown men do things just by the way they talk to him or the way they relate to them is what I would be looking for. And these stories coming out about Brian Daboll would lead you to believe that he's the type of guy that can do that. Guys like Vic Fangio who get head coaching jobs because they've been so good as a defensive coordinator for years and years. Look what's happened to a guy like that. Like, it doesn't seem like it's working out for him. This is probably why a guy like Leslie Frazier is going to get another chance to head coach as well, because he relates to his players. He's a great leader. And to me, if I'm looking for a head coach, that's got to be number one, because you're going to have an offensive coordinator. You're going to have a defensive coordinator, an entire coaching staff. You have to be ready for these little tiny situations that may go overlooked by most people, but are important if you're running a team like a business and running a team like you're a CEO, like you said. So I'm with you on that.
We got the AXN Jax 222 actually came with a really interesting topic. He says, off topic, but how fun would the NFL be if they had relegation like European soccer? I want nothing more than if the NFL grows to like 40 plus teams. Here's the only issue with growing. The only issue with growing is like, look how many shitty quarterbacks there are on the National Football League.
It waters down your product.
Look, it waters down your product a little bit, but I wouldn't mind if they got rid of AFC East, AFC South, AFC North, like just had an AFC and an NFC, right? Maybe 16 teams in each, or 17 teams in each, or even 18 teams in each, to get you up to like 36 teams. And you only play each team once. You just play everyone in the AFC. Everyone in the AFC plays everyone in the AFC. Everyone in the NFC plays the NFC, and then right? And the top 7 teams.
I don't like that, because then I would never get to see the Bills. I would never get to see the Bills play the Panthers in Carolina.
Never get to see the Bills come out here to Arizona unless it was.
So I like the setup now. Actually, I like the divisional setup. I like that you play an alternating division from the other conference each year. I like that you play an alternating division from your own conference, and then obviously the schedule works out to where you play like the corresponding team who finished equivalent to you. I actually kind of like the 32 team setup. 14, like I think it's perfect right now. I mean, I remember before Carolina and Jacksonville, and even before the Texans, right? We were in like 3 divisions per conference, and like some of the divisions had 5 teams, some had 6. Like, it was very kind of weird, right? But because if you remember, the Colts were in the Bills division back then. The Cardinals were in the same division as the Cowboys. Like, it was kind of weird, right? But that was kind of how historically it had been. So I don't know. I'm kind of a fan of what it is now. I would not actually want to see another team added to the NFL. I like it at 32. But I also wanted 16 games. I didn't want to add an extra game. So I'm more of an even number type of guy. I kind of like how it is.
So last thing I want to talk about before we get into Jabronis of the Weeks and a little bit of Kansas City talk. Sean McDermott put his foot on the throat of the New England Patriots in Belichick. I was shocked when they did that play action deep shot to Knox and then threw the ball to Tommy Doyle. I know our best friend on the Air Raid Hour, friend of the pod, definitely someone who we associate with all the time. We're best friends. Jerry Sullivan was criticizing the Bills for not pulling Josh Allen sooner in that football game. I loved how Sean McDermott put his foot on the neck of the New England Patriots, took 20 years of just absolutely took 20 years of being beaten down and just put an absolute what's the word when you have like a poltergeist where you gotta get rid it's absolutely exercised all the demons of the last 20 years. What were your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills just absolutely putting their foot on the throats of the New England Patriots there in the second half?
I mean, it's like I think I saw someone made a good comparison. It's like the older brother who's like constantly beating up on their younger brother, and then the younger brother like goes through a growth spurt and ends up being like way bigger than their older brother, and they just get all the revenge back, right? And like it felt like just an outpouring of 20 years of all the shit we took, and to finally pay him back. Like, I made a comment in our Cover One team chat about how like we don't forget that Sunday night beatdown we took to them with Randy Moss, and when the game got flexed and we just got absolutely destroyed, like 56-9 or something, and like they ran the score up all game,
Yeah.
And that's just one example. They do it. They did it to other teams 2 weeks ago. They beat Jacksonville 50-10.
Yeah.
So, like, it
Jason
was.
M with the perfect comment in here.
This is how you build a bully. This is how you get in their head when they are motivated to beat you and you destroy them over and over. Well, we felt that with the Pats forever, and that's what it was. We pretty much were marking 2 losses a year on the schedule because we couldn't beat them. We always see that graphic. Tom Brady has the most wins against any single opponent. It's the Bills. He has the best winning percentage against any single opponent. It's the Bills, and it's like they just owned us for so long. So even though it was one game, it was the playoffs. We never played them in the playoffs before, and we just destroyed them. And it doesn't erase 20 years of beatdowns, but it certainly recency bias makes us feel really good right now.
And John Herring comes in. Bill Belichick and Sean McDermott don't like each other. I think that Bill Belichick doesn't like anyone who beats him. Like to me, I think Bill Belichick probably has a lot of respect for Sean McDermott. Bill Belichick is just a weird dude. Like, I think he's an asshole, right? Like I think Bill Belichick is a fucking asshole. Like, and I think the way he treats people, the way he treats the media, the way he treats just pretty much anyone who in his inner circle, he treats them like absolute garbage, like they're disposable. And I don't like people who do that. But the people are like, well, that's just Bill. He's socially awkward, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It rubs me the wrong way. I don't like it. But at the end of the day, I do think that if you were in Bill Belichick's inner circle and you were having a conversation about Sean McDermott, he would have nothing but glowing reviews and respect for the way that Sean McDermott, brings it every week, and the way he has built this Buffalo Bills football team. But like, people were commenting like, well, did you see the way Bill Belichick shook Sean McDermott? That's the way he shakes everyone's hands, right? Like, you're not going to see Bill Belichick sit there and give someone a hug and tell them that the torch has been passed. Like, that's
just
not
got beat by 30 points.
See.
He's not going to be happy. He's already not happy as it is. I mean, ever. So
yeah, like it's that's just who he is. So third quarter is starting, but I still got some things I want to get off my chest here. We got ourselves.
I got a Jabroni of the week too.
Some Jabroni of the week. Woohoo! I got 2, so we might have 3 Jabronis of the week this week.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away, and The Rock means 3 seconds away from The Rock to lay the smackdown on your candy ass.
Yeah, I can't stop you though. You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
So since I got 2, I'm going to start with mine, and then you'll give yours, and I'll share mine. But
we haven't even done this yet, and how have we not?
Are we having fun yet?
We were supposed to lead the show with that.
I
didn't even throw in a Terry text me a smile yet either. Did we throw in a Terry? Just hold up. Terry's been listening to the show and he just wants to say something.
Terry just texted me to smile.
I can't believe I forgot those clips. That's my bad. That's on me. This is what happens when you lose producer. This is what happens when you lose producer Kendall. You gotta get anyone here. But my first Jabroni of the week is the weather media. The people on Twitter and on social media, and the people who are just reporting all week on the weather. I'm talking about you, Diana Rossini, who shows up on like Saturday morning and starts stealing all of the different talking points that local reporters have been using all week. Like, Dawson Knox isn't wearing sleeves, guys. I'm the first to break this news. It's like, no, you weren't. Like, fucking Matt Perino broke that thing on Tuesday or something. Like, thanks a lot, Diana Rossini from ESPN, for coming in and stealing everyone's thunder. But just anyone, whether it's local or whatever, just the nonsense, the fact that the weather dominated, the weather conversation dominated social media and the dialogue this week. Diana Rossini's like, I put a cup of water outside and it took 7 minutes to freeze. Like, who gives a fucking shit? There was no wind, there was no rain, there was no precipitation. It was just a little chilly, right? Like, absolute BS. And my Jabroni of the week is not just the weather media, but I'm gonna go with Adam Benini of Channel 2 as my Jabroni of the week. And Jerry Hughes gets my anti-Jabroni for absolute poning him at the podium post game. So one of the things that you'll notice, and you'll notice it after the Monday Night Football game too, is the media likes to write their story before they actually get to the podium to ask players questions. And then they try to ask them questions to direct them to answer a question in a way that will help them fill in a story that they've essentially already written. They don't want to hear what the players actually have to say. They want to direct them in a way in which they can just complete the story that they've already pretty much written either in their head or drafted once over. And essentially Adam Bonini had written this story, had written this story about, the Buffalo Bills and like the weather and Monday Night Football and all this stuff, sort of the Monday Night Football game motivating them. He had pretty much probably already written a story. Monday Night Football has motivated you guys. It turned around your season. It gave you the edge, blah, blah. And he wanted Jerry Hughes to essentially just agree with him and give him some generic response so he could finish the story. And Jerry was like, fuck you, dude. Like, fuck you. It's an 18-game season. There's an ebb and a flow. This is the way the National Football League works. It wasn't that wasn't what motivated us. That's just how an NFL season works. Sometimes you go out there and you have a bad game. Like, it wasn't some embarrassing thing that turned around our season that everyone out here is making it out to be. Like, we hear the shit you guys are talking about. So to me, I'm going with Adam Bonini from Channel 2 for trying to get Jerry Hughes to finish his story for him. And kudos to you, Jerry, for absolutely poning him at the podium.
That's amazing. And a very good selection. And Spin, great comment. Judge is gonna roast him, I'm sure, but this is my jabroni of the week, and it's Michael Holley from Boston NBC. Michael Holley is the guy that after the Patriots beat the Bills 14-10 basically said that Sean McDermott was in denial about his football team, said that the Bills were dead in the AFC East, and that's fine. But why is he the jabroni of the week this week? Well, because he doubled down basically on his viewpoint that the Bills weren't any good and essentially made the comment that they had only beaten 3 playoff teams, 2 of which were the Patriots, including the win that they just won, and the Chiefs, who he claimed or quoted in his video was early in the year. So apparently he doesn't mean as much. Okay. Then his co-host also, Tom Curran, basically said, I think you're over. He basically, I'm paraphrasing this, but you can go watch the video. He paraphrased and said, I think you're overstating that the Bills aren't that good. Like, they just beat the Patriots 47-17, basically. And essentially why Mike Holley is a jabroni of the week is because he wasn't willing to admit that the Bills just essentially own the Patriots and that he was trying to create some narrative about the Bills only beating 2 playoff teams. Let me remind you that they only actually played 5 teams all year that are in the playoffs. So out of a 17-game season, only 5 teams they played against are actually in the playoffs. The Chiefs, the Titans, the Patriots, the Steelers, and Tampa Bay. They lost to Tampa Bay, I get it, and they lost to Steelers week 1. They lost to Tennessee on the last play of the game. They beat the Chiefs, and they beat Patriots now twice. So, Mike Holley, you are an absolute jabroni. Can't stand you. Jabroni of the week for me easily, Mike Holley.
Yeah, and I mean, Jason then comes in here like, this was the funny thing. He said, Coran basically said, how can you tell me the Bills aren't good after you just saw what you, after you just witnessed that? And pretty much Michael Howard is like, well, the Bills haven't beaten anyone good this year. And Tom Cran's like, well, did you just see this offense explosion? Well, they haven't beat any good this year. Well, does it really matter? Like, they're in the playoffs now and they just beat a playoff team in the playoffs. Like, well, they haven't beat anyone good. Like, they just, every time Michael Holley opened his mouth, someone else on the panel told him why he was being fucking ridiculous. And he just kept going back and saying the same thing over and over again. And then, Mr. Cosmo coming in here saying Matt Castle did a double take. The look on Matt Castle's face, who was on like via Skype or webcam or whatever. He wasn't in the studio. Just the look on his face was he's like, I can't wait till they give me a second so I can tell this dude what a fucking clown he is. Like, he was just like sitting there like, come on, give me a second. I want to talk. Like, give me a second. Like, he wanted to talk so bad just to tell Michael Holley what a fucking clown he was. So that one was golden as the Rams just go up 28-0 here on a Cooper Kupp touchdown. That should just about do it for the Cardinals season. But speaking of seasons over, my second jabroni of the week is Dak Prescott. So the end of that, first of all, that was the worst game of football I think I've ever watched. Just both. I said it on Twitter, and I believe it. Both the teams should have been eliminated from the playoffs after that game. San Francisco and Dallas, that was just the most embarrassing playoff game I've ever seen in my entire life. But
I don't know, man. Philadelphia was pretty bad.
Yeah, but like one team was good. Like,
true.
One of the teams was good. In that San Francisco-Dallas game, it was just like they were each trying to hand each other the game, and the other team just refused to accept the fact that the other team was trying to hand them the game because they were both so incompetent. It was Jimmy Garoppolo is just fucking. I can't believe Jimmy Garoppolo was on to the second round of the playoffs. I would start Trey Lance. I don't give a shit how bad he is. I understand that they limped their way into the playoffs with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't care. Like, it's awful. But my Jabroni of the week is Dak Prescott. The Cowboys played awful. Didn't have a pulse. All those receiving weapons, and Dalton Schultz was his leading receiver heading into the second half. 14 penalties. The offensive line was a mess. The play calling, Kellen Moore calling that QB sneak with 10 seconds left. I mean, just absolute. The players were awful. The coaches were awful. Everyone was awful on the Dallas Cowboys offense. And after the game, Dak Prescott mentions in his post-game press conference, like, oh, I didn't appreciate the fans throwing bottles at us as we were leaving the field. And then people in the press were like, they weren't throwing the bottles at you. He was like, well, who are they throwing the bottles at? And they're like, they're throwing the balls at the referees. He was like, oh, well, I agree with that. Like,
yeah, he was like,
who wouldn't
credit
be
to them
who would,
is what he said.
Credit to them. Who wouldn't be upset? He's blaming because Dak Prescott wasn't smart enough to know that in that situation, you hand the official the ball, not your center, because the official has to touch it. So then the official, to his credit, is trying as hard as he can to get there and touch that football so you can get one more playoff. And you're going to go and you're going to blame the officials. Like, Dak Prescott is a good dude. There was a story before the game about how he got all of the star players to sort of put a pool of money together to play the practice squad players because they don't get as big a paycheck. Like, he is a great guy in the community. He is a great person. But I am glad that the Buffalo Bills are the ones who paid a franchise quarterback that understands what the word accountability means and what accountability looks like, because the antonym of accountability is exactly what Dak Prescott presented in that press conference. It was embarrassing for him. It was embarrassing for the Dallas Cowboys organization. And if you watch Josh Allen in his post-game press conferences, even after losses, he sits up there and he takes the blame and he takes it personally and he learns from his mistakes and he goes out there and he usually doesn't make the same mistake a second time. Dak Prescott could take a lesson from Josh Allen on how to handle things not going your way in a football game, how to handle, a post-game press conference. His lack of accountability was just absolutely condoning violence against officials. Just absolutely, like, listen, I'll sit here and make fun of NFL officials all I want and call them fucktards on this show, right? Like, we do it on a weekly basis, all in good fun. I don't condone violence. I don't want someone to go to their house and punch them in the face. Like, that's not something that I want people to do. Like, it's absolutely embarrassing for Dak Prescott. And I'm just glad we have a QB1 who understands what the word accountability means.
Exactly. And people are going to probably think and be like, oh, well, you calling Dak Prescott the Jabroni of the week because that last play of the game? Like, no, it has nothing to do with that.
No,
it has everything to do with what he said afterwards. And it was even like cringy that like people were like laughing at it, honestly, too, like in the room. Like that was pretty cringy too.
Kyle Brandt I was trying to think of a word to describe, and Jessica calls the Cowboys an embarrassment. John Herring says they're privileged. I was trying to think of a word to describe the Dallas Cowboys, and Kyle Brandt hit the nail right on the head. He called them superficial. That's what that football team is. It's a bunch of superficial dudes. It's a GM who's also your owner who builds his team like he's building a Madden roster.
When they lose, it's like the one time I can tolerate Stephen A.
Yeah. I always look forward to I actually turn on ESPN the day after the Cowboys lose a big game just to watch Stephen A light up a stogie and make fun of the Dallas Cowboys. It's quite a good time. But on to Kansas City, Sunday, 6:30 p.m. Is it 6:30? Yeah, so it'll be 4:30 my time. Sorry, I got thrown off. So Sunday, 6:30 CBS. It's Jim Nance, it's Tony Romo, it's Tracy Wolfson, it's Jay Feely, it's the whole shebang. We got the number one crew. It's the marquee game. It is the last game of the weekend. I'm not gonna lie to you. After watching, I made this comment, like 7 playoff teams is ridiculous because the 7th team is hot garbage. I will sit here and honestly say I wish Kansas City had a bye week this week, because I actually think the Steelers did a great job of helping the Kansas City Chiefs like fine-tune themselves before they go and play the Buffalo Bills. I would have rather had them coming off of a week of extra rest and be rusty than having gone out there and gotten nice and primed against the punching bag that was the Pittsburgh Steelers. They shellacked them. They absolutely shellacked them. And now they're going to come in a rhythm and a flow. I really wish that they hadn't played last week.
I mean, Al Michaels was like a savage last night when they showed the graphic of like the 10 straight punts, and he's like, they're very consistent or whatever he said. My preliminary thoughts on this game, it's part 4, fourth time these teams are playing in the last 2 years, very familiar with each other. Zebot, our former colleague at Fanatics, made a good comparison. We've made this comparison too, like Patriots Colts of old with Manning and Brady. I think the difference being is like the Bills beat the Chiefs in the regular season. Fine. The Chiefs are up 2-1, obviously, in this sort of short window that I'm talking about. I do not want the Bills to become this perennial team that can't get over the Kansas City hump when it comes playoff time. And that's my preliminary thought here is don't become the 1990s New York Knicks to the 1990s Bulls, where the Bulls are the Chiefs and you're the Knicks, and you can't get past Michael Jordan and Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Like you have to beat them in the playoffs at some point. You knew the road was going to lead here. Most likely you knew the road was going to lead here. And while it's unfortunate it leads to Arrowhead and not Highmark Stadium, you knew the road was going to lead here. So if you're the Bills, you've been waiting for this moment pretty much for your redemption since that infamous Stephon Diggs picture coming off the field in last year's AFC Championship game. Now, I know it's not the AFC Championship game, but who cares, right? It's just as important, if not more important now. And so preliminary thoughts are you have to be ready for this, and you should be ready for this game if you're the Bills organization.
Jess comes in, she says, Judge, I think the Steelers beat up Kansas City a little bit. They did, like, here's the thing too, right? Like Ben Roethlisberger, who can't throw the ball more than 10 yards, had some success down the field, took some shots, hit some shots. And they were still able to have, they were able to run the ball semi-effectively when it was close. But that also could just be Kansas City understanding that they didn't really need to put as much of an effort into it. So maybe I think this game is going to be an absolute shootout depending on officiating, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Brooke comes in and she says, at the Amherst game, my friends and I just scream at the refs and point out their mistakes and offer them LASIK eye surgery. Yes, you don't want to gouge their eyes out. You don't want to wish harm upon them. You want them to get the LASIK eye care surgery you need. You care about them as people, and you want them to help them better themselves. So Brooke, perfect example of the way to treat referees. You offer them help. You don't condone violence against them. But the way I look at it, early preview, is these are two different football teams, right? Like that. Then I honestly don't even know what you're going to glean going back and watching that Week 5 matchup. These are two different. If you look at the Bills, they're more balanced on offense. Trey White is out. So our DBs are going to be severely tested for the first time since the Trey White injury. Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace are going to be tested. Mac Jones had a little bit of success. I know it was garbage time. I know maybe they weren't. They were playing a little bit more prevent defense than usual. It's going to be a big week. The Buffalo Bills spent their offseason building a roster to try to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Gregory Rousseau, you're going to have to step back up. Mario Addison, if you're healthy. Jerry Hughes, Ed Oliver, Harrison Phillips, the forest through the trees. So the Buffalo Bills, that's going to need to come back this week. And then you look over at Kansas City. Jerick McKinnon has given that offense a different look, some success on the ground that they haven't had this season. It's just been a rotating litany of running backs, Gore and Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, all these guys just rotating out and out, and they couldn't find any consistency. They're getting some consistency from Jerick McKinnon, and Chris Jones is going to be healthy for this football game. So it's going to be interesting. These are two different football teams. If they don't over officiate this game, I would smash the 52.5 point over. Absolutely smash it.
Well, I think even if they do over officiate it, I think you can still see that, because that tends to lead to more possessions, tends to lead to more stoppages in the clock. I probably would smash the over anyway. It doesn't look like weather's going to be an issue. Both of these offenses are coming off scoring 40 plus points. JD Plett says, I'm flying to Kansas City on Saturday all the way from Alaska.
Pumped for you, dude.
Good
so
for
pumped.
you, man. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Mattis comes in and says, we have Josh Allen. I repeat, we have Josh Allen. What else matters? Listen, we don't want to admit it, but Patrick Mahomes is also a very, very good quarterback as well. To me, I expect a shootout. To me, the team that executes better offensively, that doesn't, get themselves into third and longs, that doesn't, have to punt as much, like the team that executes better, that goes out there and does what they're supposed to do, the defense that maybe forces one turnover, a big play turnover, that's a team that's going to win. You got to play mistake-free football, force a mistake, and you got to execute. That's who's going to win this football game. I know it sounds like George, that's the most common sense thing I've ever heard. Like that's really not that bold of a take. When you have two really good football teams, that's what it comes down to. What team makes a mistake? What team executes better that day? Because even good football teams have a bad day. So if the Chiefs go out there and have a bad day, the Bills will win. If the Bills go out there and have a bad day, the Chiefs will win. I mean, it's common sense, but they're both really good football teams. And if they both are out there executing, and going back and forth, the team that slips up, the team that makes a mistake, the team that has to punt, the team that throws a pick or fumbles the football, they're the ones who are going to lose the football game. And these are two really, really good football teams.
Yeah, and I mean, like if you just take a look at how each of these teams played in their first playoff game that they've had, I mean, both of them played really well, right? I mean, the Chiefs defense played obviously really well. It's the Steelers offense, I know that. But the Patriots offense either, right, not much of like Mac Jones, right? These were probably maybe the two worst quarterbacks in the playoffs between Ben Roethlisberger and Mac Jones. So how much are you gleaning from that? I glean more towards what I saw from their offenses, right? TJ Watt had that kind of fluky touchdown early, the defensive one, but like Chiefs offense scored 42 points, right? And the Bills offense scored 47. So offensively, both teams are doing well. I think defensively is probably where you say if one of these defenses makes a big play, turnover, like you said, takeaway, that's really maybe what could be the difference.
JD Plett comes in and says, we're a 2-point dog. Basically the favorite if it was a neutral field. I mean, that's just a fact. Typically the home team, if it's a even split, gets a 3-point advantage, right? A field goal advantage because of the home team. Vegas isn't even given the Chiefs that 3-point home field bump. So if this game was played in Buffalo or on a neutral field, even though the fact that the Bills are a 3 seed, they might actually be the favorites. It really is that home field advantage that's giving the Chiefs that favorite in terms of the Vegas betting odds. So it really is a 50-50 game here. Before we do go, I don't want to get too much into our Sunday pregame, but I think officiating is going to be a key in this football game. And here's my take on officiating. I know I just want to talk about football. I don't want to talk about the officials. Blah, blah, I hate. But if you look at it, the Kansas City defense struggled to start this football season. What changed? They went back to their typical ways in the secondary. The Kansas City secondary is a secondary that is going to hold on every play, that is going to commit a DPI in every play. And they are going to see if the referees have the stomach to actually call it. Some officiating crews have the stomach to call it. Other officiating crews don't. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game because they committed defensive pass interference on almost every play. They held our receivers on almost every play. And the Buffalo Bills didn't match that same energy on the other side of the ball. They decided to not take that sort of tactic. The Kansas City Chiefs, what happened 2 weeks later in the Super Bowl when they tried the same approach against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? The referees threw the flags and they lost that football game in an embarrassing fashion because they can't play defense unless they have that crutch to rely upon. The Buffalo Bills decided in that Week 5 game to fight fire with fire, and they took it to the Chiefs wide receivers the way that they took it to us in that AFC Championship game. And for the most part, the officials didn't call it. They let things slide. And that's the thing. You just hope they're equitable, right? If the officials decide to call it, that's fine. If the officials decide to not call that stuff, that's also fine, as long as they do it the same way for both teams. But we've seen in the past that officiating crews will call one way for one team and another way for another team. And that's just a fact of life. And it's going to be really unfortunate if that is something that happens, if that is something that we see on Sunday night, especially because in terms of the national narrative and the way the national media speaks, they're all paid by the National Football League. So for the most part, they do the NFL's bidding, and they're not going to talk about the fact that maybe the Buffalo Bills lose the game on Sunday if the officiating is bad, et cetera. But I'm just going down a rabbit hole now. But I'm looking at the crew for this game. John Hussey is the head official for this game. Called the 4th least penalties all year of all the officiating crews, and nobody has called fewer pass interferences, 16, than John Hussey's crew. So it's looking like it's going to be a crew that is going to let these two teams play. Is going to be a crew that lets them be aggressive. I don't know whether that means it's going to be maybe a lower scoring game that we think, or it's going to be an absolute shootout. I have no idea. Usually, who knows? So maybe it is a lower scoring game than we think. if the officials maybe let a lot of things like holding, DPIs and all that stuff go. Maybe it is a lower scoring game than we think.
I don't even want to get those thoughts in my head about issue. Like, we already kind of saw that a little bit in the first half of that Tampa Bay game. And it's just making me angry thinking about it. So I'm going to try to put that out of my mind for the rest of the week if I can.
All right. Well, that should just about wrap it up for this evening. Before we go, Brian Dable yesterday interviewed with Chicago and Miami. Leslie Frazier interviewed yesterday with Miami. He's interviewing later on this week with Chicago. Joe Shane has interviewed with the Giants and the Bears. And a report came out today that he's considered probably the front runner for the Giants job. Brian Dable has not interviewed with the Giants yet, but I don't think the Giants have interviewed any head coaching candidates. They're probably waiting on a GM. So honestly, it's looking like Brian Dable and Leslie Frazier and Joe Shane might no longer be a part of the Buffalo Bills organization moving forward. We touched on our last show at length the different scenarios that we'd like to see, so we won't touch it on this show, but this offseason, that's going to be part of the conversation. The Buffalo Bills are uber successful this year, and let's hope that all these guys go out on a winning note. Remember when Bill Belichick won and both Charlie Weiss went to Notre Dame and Romeo Crennel went to Cleveland, and it was that sort of final send-off winning that Super Bowl. So let's hope we get that from the Buffalo Bills. And also, it's 28-8 right now. Somebody give Raheem Morris a fucking job, please. Defensive coordinator of the LA Rams, was the interim head coach of the Atlanta Falcons last year. He was hired way too young in Tampa Bay to be a head coach. He sort of flamed out. He has gone to a number of different places now, and he's paid his dues.
Good coach.
Really, really good coach. I haven't seen his name on a single interview list yet. I know
he
nobody.
Under Frazier, didn't he?
He did it in Tampa, I believe.
Oh, in Tampa.
Anyway, somebody give that man a fucking job, please. He deserves it just as much as Leslie Frazier and Brian Dable do. That's my final piece. And don't give a job to Vance Joseph. He fucking sucks, and everyone sees that tonight. Thank God. I was talking to Kevin.
Miami.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to. Hopefully, he doesn't take offense to this. But I was talking to Kevin Gerard today. Our friend from Over the Buffalo Fanatics about what he would like to see in Miami, and he sarcastically messaged me, yeah, I'm super pumped about how Vance Joseph is a real option. I think back to the 1 year he was our DC and promptly gave up the most yards in Dolphins history, parlayed that somehow into a head coaching job at Denver. He was embarrassing there, but I'm encouraged to see how he can't figure out how to use Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons properly in Arizona. So Kevin Gerard, not a big fan of Vance Joseph, who I have always not been a fan of. My brother-in-law looks at me all the time. He's like, what do you have against Vance Joseph? Like, what has he done to your family? And I'm like, nothing. He just fucking sucks.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my spiel. And ladies and gentlemen, hopefully this was literally everyone's reaction the entire game on Saturday. And I'm sorry we didn't play this clip more.
Are we having fun yet?
We certainly are having fun here at the Air Raid Hour. We certainly are having fun as Bills fans. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.